My name is Clarissa. I am 31 years old, and this Thanksgiving, I learned just how cruel and manipulative family can be when they are desperate for convenience. What began as a simple holiday visit spiraled into one of the most infuriating betrayals I have ever experienced, all orchestrated by the one person I should have been able to trust, my own sister. And when I tell you that I walked into a setup so elaborate, so disgusting, it took the police to get me out, you will understand why I do not just cut people off. I erase them. Thanksgiving had always been a complicated affair in my family. Too many aunts competing for attention, uncles who drank too much, cousins with more drama than common sense, and kids, so many kids, screaming, crying, breaking things, and never being watched. But this year, my sister Marlene swore it would be different. She said they had planned a calm, organized get-together in a relative's rental home near Asheville, North Carolina, where everyone would bring a dish, enjoy the fall foliage, and spend quality time together. I believed her. I even took a few days off work, packed a pumpkin pie, and made the 4-hour drive, thinking, for once, things might go smoothly. What I walked into was something out of a nightmare. The second I stepped inside the rental house, I sensed something was off. The adults were nowhere to be seen, and instead, there was a chaotic swirl of children, toddlers, preteens, infants crawling across the floor, juice boxes exploding, toys scattered like landmines. Before I could even set down my pie, someone shoved a baby into my arms. Then another cousin's kid grabbed my hand, whining about a broken tablet. I looked around, confused, and spotted Marlene. She waved from across the room with a smile so fake I could have peeled it off her face. I tried to ask what was going on, but she was already gone, disappearing into the kitchen. One of the other aunts, Aunt Colleen, pointed to a pile of diapers and toys in the corner and told me to get started. I blinked. Get started with what? I asked if someone could explain why I was suddenly drowning in children while everyone else was popping open bottles of wine in the next room. That was when the bomb dropped. Aunt Colleen, with the confidence of someone who thought she was doing me a favor, told me that Marlene said I had offered to babysit all the kids for the entire holiday. Not just that evening. The entire 4-day Thanksgiving weekend. I laughed out loud. I told them that Marlene had lied. That I never agreed to babysit anyone, let alone an entire horde of sugar-fueled monsters for multiple days. But as I looked around, the adults just stared at me. Not one of them looked surprised. Not one of them believed me. My own cousins started telling me that it was too late to change plans, that they had made reservations for outings, wine tastings, and even a mini shopping spree at the Asheville outlets because they thought I had everything handled. I was speechless. Furious. Marlene came out of the kitchen holding a glass of Prosecco, acting clueless and giggly. When I confronted her, she just shrugged and said that someone had to help and that I was the best with kids anyway. I told them all firmly that I would not do it. I picked up my things and headed for the door, but the moment I reached for the knob, Uncle Darren stood in front of it like a bodyguard. He said that I had to help, that it was family, and that it did not matter who said what, they needed me, and I was going to do it. Something snapped in me right then. This was not just a misunderstanding. This was an ambush. A manipulation. A kidnapping in slow motion. I had walked into that house under false pretenses, and now I was being told that I was not allowed to leave? That I had to stay and serve their needs? That my no meant nothing? I stepped back, pulled out my phone, and told them I was calling the police. The room went silent. Someone laughed. Aunt Colleen said I was being dramatic. Marlene rolled her eyes and said I was bluffing. But I was not. I pressed the button and calmly, clearly, reported that I was being held against my will in a house where I was being forced to babysit children I had not agreed to watch. I gave them the address. And I told them I would not hang up until an officer arrived. They still did not believe me. They kept telling me to hang up, that this was family, that we could talk it out. But I stayed on the line with the dispatcher until I heard a knock at the door. You should have seen their faces when they opened it. 2 officers from the Asheville Police Department stepped inside and immediately asked who had made the call. I raised my hand, walked right past my stunned relatives, and explained everything, how I had been lied to, manipulated, and then blocked from leaving the house. The officers were calm but firm. They asked several people for their side of the story, but it was clear something was off. Too many children. Too few explanations. One of the officers said they could press charges for unlawful detainment if I wanted to go that route. I was tempted. I was boiling with rage. But I was also tired. I said that I just wanted to leave, that I would let it go this time, but that I never wanted to hear from these people again. The officers nodded, and one of them escorted me to my car. I drove away with my hands shaking, my pie still untouched on the passenger seat. I could barely breathe. It was not just the betrayal, it was the calculation of it all. My sister knew exactly what she was doing. She knew I would not volunteer to babysit dozens of kids, so she decided to trap me instead. And the others? They were fine with it. They were in on it. They would have kept me there all weekend like a servant if I had not called for help. I never knew my family could be so dangerous. So indifferent to my autonomy. So united in using me. And the worst part? When I got home, Marlene texted me. Not to apologize. But to say that I embarrassed her in front of the family and ruined Thanksgiving. No. They ruined it. And next year, I will be celebrating with people who do not see me as free labor. Because this year, I learned that blood means nothing if the people in your family would rather trap you than treat you with respect. Update 1. I thought the nightmare ended the moment I drove away from that house and watched it disappear in my rearview mirror, but I underestimated how deeply entitled people can dig when they believe someone owes them free labor. I woke up the next morning in my apartment in Raleigh still tense, my body sore from sleeping badly, my head buzzing with everything that had happened. I told myself I would take the day to decompress, maybe go for a long walk, clean my place, and pretend Thanksgiving had never happened. I was wrong to think they would let it go that easily. Late that morning, I heard voices outside my building. At first, I ignored them. Then I heard my name. Not once, not twice, but over and over, louder each time, the way people shout when they are convinced they are in the right. I walked to the window and looked down, and my stomach dropped. My relatives were standing there in a loose, irritated cluster like a pack of people who had traveled together with a shared mission. Aunts, cousins, and even my sister were there, with several children already bouncing off the walls, running up and down the sidewalk, completely unsupervised. It was like they had brought the chaos with them on purpose, as if recreating it would somehow force me back into my role. The entitlement on their faces was unreal. They were not there to apologize. They were not there to check on me after what had happened. They were there because their plans had been interrupted, and in their minds, that was my fault. I stayed inside for several minutes, hoping they would get tired and leave, but instead they grew louder. Neighbors started peeking through curtains. Someone across the street stepped out onto their porch. I realized that if I did not confront this head-on, they would escalate it until it became another spectacle. When I opened the door to my building, the noise hit me immediately. They surged forward as if they had been waiting for a signal. The first thing they demanded was that I take all the children for just one day. Just one day, they insisted, framing it like some generous compromise. They had made restaurant reservations, apparently, and they deserved to relax after all the stress I had caused. That was how they saw it. Not that they had tried to trap me. Not that the police had been involved. But that I had inconvenienced them, and now I was expected to fix it. I refused immediately and without hesitation. I did not soften it. I did not explain myself. I simply shut it down. That was when the mood shifted. The fake politeness evaporated, and the real ugliness came out. One of my aunts, the same one who had confidently pointed me toward the diapers the day before, stepped forward with her jaw clenched and her eyes sharp. She started threatening me, not physically, but with the kind of venom that only family seems comfortable using. She hinted at turning everyone against me, at making sure I would never be welcome at another family event, at spreading stories about how unstable and selfish I was. She acted like she was doing me a favor by warning me. Something inside me broke at that moment. Not cracked. Not bent. Broke clean through. I realized they had learned nothing. The police, the humiliation, the disruption of their holiday plans meant nothing to them. They still saw me as property. As a resource. As someone they could stand under the house of and pressure until I gave in. And the worst part was that they brought their children with them, using them like props, like emotional weapons, as if the sight of bored, restless kids would guilt me into compliance. I told her to leave. Not calmly. Not politely. I told her to get away from my home and never come back. She leaned closer instead, emboldened by the group behind her, convinced that numbers made her untouchable. That was when I did something I never thought I would do. Something that went against every idea I had of myself as controlled, composed, and reasonable. I stepped forward and spat directly in her face. The sound alone seemed to freeze time. The entire group went silent. The children stopped moving. My aunt stood there stunned, her mouth open, her confidence evaporating in an instant. I slammed the door shut immediately after, locking it with shaking hands, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might crack my ribs. Through the door, I could hear gasps, shouting, outrage, disbelief. But I did not open it again. I did not look back out the window. I slid down against the door and sat on the floor, breathing hard, consumed by a rage so intense it scared me. I had crossed a line, and I knew it. It was unethical. It was raw. It was fueled by anger that had been building for years of being treated like something less than a person. But in that moment, it was the only language they seemed to understand. And as I sat there, still shaking, one truth became painfully clear to me. These people were not just selfish. They were dangerous in the quiet, everyday way that entitlement becomes coercion. And for the first time in my life, I realized how far they could push someone before that person finally snapped. Update 2. In the days that followed the confrontation on my doorstep, the silence from my relatives was louder than any argument. There were no more crowds outside my building. No more texts from my sister. No more fake apologies disguised as guilt-tripping voicemails. But I knew better than to believe it was over. When people like that go quiet, it is not because they have grown. It is because they are recalculating. And sure enough, just as I started to regain some sense of calm, the real retaliation began. It started with an envelope. I found it in my mailbox 3 mornings later, official and thick, stamped with courthouse lettering. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Then I saw her name. My Aunt Colleen. The same aunt I had spat on, the same one who had stood outside my home with her smug little threats and forced smiles, now had the audacity to sue me for assault. I laughed. Not out of amusement but from the sheer absurdity. She had spent years treating me like unpaid labor, like her personal convenience, and now she wanted to drag me into court because I finally reacted. She claimed emotional distress. Said she was traumatized. Accused me of endangering her in front of her children. It was all written in carefully typed legalese, the tone cold and calculated, the intent crystal clear: punishment, not justice. I contacted a lawyer. A good one. One who had dealt with more malicious family vendettas than I cared to imagine. She reviewed the filing, listened to everything I told her, and then gave me the kind of answer that feels like sunlight after weeks of storm. There was no case. No standing. No injury. No evidence of trauma beyond embarrassment and entitlement. It was a performative gesture wrapped in legal formality. A tantrum with a filing fee. The court rejected the suit in under 2 weeks. That should have been the end. Anyone with a shred of self-awareness would have taken the loss and stepped back. But Colleen was not just angry, she was humiliated. And people like her never forget the feeling of being dismissed, especially by someone they once considered beneath them. A few days after the rejection, she reached out. First, through my sister, who sent a message claiming that Colleen wanted to talk. Just talk. Just clear the air. I blocked her. Then through a cousin, who emailed me with a long, wordy letter about family ties, forgiveness, and second chances. I deleted it without finishing the second paragraph. Then Colleen showed up in person. She came during the early afternoon, alone, dressed like she had come from church, holding a neutral expression that looked rehearsed and stiff. I did not answer the door. I watched through the peephole as she knocked, waited, and eventually pulled out her phone. Moments later, a text from a new number came through. It was her. She wrote that she wanted to move past everything, that she realized things had gone too far, and that she just wanted one peaceful conversation. I did not believe a word of it. Colleen was not built for peace. She was built for control. And when she lost control of someone she thought she had cornered, her next instinct was to lure them back in with softness that never existed. I knew what that meeting would be. It would not be reconciliation. It would be entrapment. An attempt to record something, twist my words, find leverage. Her lawsuit had failed, but her desire to see me kneel in submission had not. So I responded only once. I said I never wanted to see her again. I did not need her apologies. I did not want her explanations. She was not welcome in my life, and I wanted no connection to her, her children, or any member of her branch of the family tree. And then I blocked the number. She did not take it well. I heard from another cousin, one who had always been quiet during the drama, that Colleen was furious. She had believed she could smooth things over with a performance, that I would fold under the pressure of confrontation, that I would accept her terms simply to end the tension. She was wrong. I had learned something powerful in those weeks. Saying no, when you are raised in a family that feeds on guilt, is like breaking a curse. And once broken, it is impossible to go back. I began hearing about family gatherings again not long after. Someone sent me a photo from a small pre-Christmas dinner they had organized. I was not invited. That did not bother me. What bothered me was what I heard from the same quiet cousin a week later. She told me off the record, as a warning, that the only reason I had been excluded was because they had been planning something for me at the dinner. A confrontation. A reckoning. A setup disguised as a holiday meal. They had not invited me because I would have walked into another trap. That was when the last thread finally snapped. Any illusion that they wanted peace, closure, or healing was gone. What they wanted was to reclaim the version of me that had stayed silent for too long. And when they could not have her, they wanted revenge. But this time, they had nothing left to hold over me. No social guilt. No childhood obligation. No fear of loneliness. They had burned those bridges and then expected me to come back with a fire hose. But I did not. Because when you survive a family like that, you do not just grow stronger. You grow wiser. And you learn that the most dangerous invitations are the ones wrapped in false kindness, hiding sharp teeth behind warm smiles. Update 3. It ended not with another confrontation, not with a slammed door or a final blowout, but with silence, the cold, calculated kind of silence that people weaponize when they think they are punishing you. One afternoon, as I was scrolling through my phone, catching up on work emails and making plans for the weekend, I noticed the notifications had slowed. Family group chats, which once buzzed constantly with half-baked plans, recipe swaps, forwarded memes, and chaotic birthday reminders, had gone unusually quiet. I opened one of the chats out of curiosity. What I saw was a blank screen. I had been removed. Then I checked another. Removed again. And another. And another. Every single group that had included extended family, every thread that tied me to the digital illusion of belonging, was gone. No messages. No warnings. No explanations. I had been erased. But I did not feel rage. I did not feel heartbreak. I felt relief. Because for the first time in my adult life, I was not tethered to people who had proven, repeatedly, that they only wanted me around when I was useful, silent, and compliant. This wasn't an oversight or a cleanup. It was strategic. Or more accurately, it was Colleen. This had all started with her. My sister Marlene might have set the trap that Thanksgiving, but Colleen was the one who lit the match, who escalated, who turned a personal boundary into a public crusade for control. This removal from the family digital space was her last-ditch effort to deliver a message, the final phase in her pathetic campaign to humble me. To humiliate me. To isolate me and make me beg. I knew what she wanted. She expected me to come crawling back, offering apologies I did not mean, pretending to regret things I had never done, asking for forgiveness I did not need. She wanted to watch me shrink. To see the woman who had called the police on her own family, who had refused to watch a dozen kids without consent, who had stood in her doorway and said no with her full chest, come back on her knees. But that fantasy was never going to be fulfilled. And the longer they waited for my apology, the quieter their phones would remain. What she had not understood was that my silence was not surrender. It was peace. It was a line in the sand that I had drawn, and once crossed, I had no interest in returning to the battlefield. Their group chats could continue without me. Their passive-aggressive parties, their guilt-saturated traditions, their twisted ideas of family unity held together by secrets and power plays, I no longer needed any of it. And that terrified them more than anything I had said or done. As for Marlene, my sister, the one who started it all with her deception, her silence was even more telling than Colleen's stunts. After the initial incident, after the lawsuit, after the attempted fake reconciliation, she vanished from my life entirely. No texts. No calls. No accidental likes on social media. She knew what she had done, and she knew that any attempt to mend it would ignite a new explosion. And so she chose distance. Not out of maturity. But out of fear. Because Marlene understood something the rest of them were too proud to admit, I was no longer someone they could control. She had watched the entire storm unfold. She had seen how far I would go to defend my boundaries. She knew that if she opened that door, I would walk through it with the truth, and the lies she had fed to the family would crumble under the weight of it. So she stayed away, hoping the distance would smooth it over, that time would do what words could not. But time, like truth, does not erase betrayal. It only solidifies it. It has been months since I was removed from those groups, and not a single person has reached out. Not to apologize. Not to check on me. Not to admit they were wrong. That tells me everything I need to know. I was never part of that family by love. Only by obligation. And when I finally refused to carry the weight of their comfort, they dropped me like an anchor. Let them. I have rebuilt my own traditions. I spent the next Thanksgiving not babysitting, not serving, not faking smiles through passive-aggressive jabs, but sitting in a quiet mountain cabin I booked for myself outside Gatlinburg, sipping hot cider, watching snowfall drift past the window, wrapped in the calm of a life no longer dictated by toxic bloodlines. Family is not who shares your last name. It is who respects your no. And mine? They taught me exactly who they were when I finally said it. And I will never forget it.